Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Hugh Hardy, joined once again by Jeff Robinson. Jeff, it's back-to-back weekends of Sevens rugby as we head on down to Perth. And I know last week I mentioned that the 8-team format seems to really be getting its stride. I think it's, very easy to understand of like, okay, day one, that's the pool games. Day two, that's the playoff structure. And it worked last week because Canada obviously got to the Cup semi-finals and eventually picked up the bronze. From that, the problem is that when there's only 8 teams, is that they're the 8 best teams in the world, meaning you have to continually face the best teams in the world. And if you're not the best team in the world, then you're going to have a tough time. So, unfortunately, Canada aren't named Australia or New Zealand, unfortunately. So, you gotta really fight for that championship playoff position. Because there was only one change to the pool from the Singapore Sevens, is that instead of facing New Zealand in the pool, you're facing Australia in the pool. Mm-hmm. Instead of facing world number 1, you're facing world number 2.
Problem A or problem B?
Yeah. So, and it was always going to be a tough contest, especially against France. Last time out, it was an overtime win for Canada, and it seems as though the pendulum has swung back in the Europeans' favour because the opening game was a 12-24 loss to France. It was followed up by an impressive 45-7 win over Great Britain, and then you're up against Australia again, and unfortunately that's another loss, so 10-38, which means that with only one win, Canada can only progress to the 5th place playoff. So, you make do with what you can. Their first match was against Fiji, which was a 26-19 win, before facing Japan for the 5th place final, and thankfully they were able to get a win out of that as well, 36-5. So finishing 5th in the Perth Sevens, which is, not the highest place they've been this season, but also not the lowest as well. I think because the caliber of the games are so high, you really want to be winning as many as you can. And unfortunately, when you have a number of teams and you're trying to compete to get into that playoff spot, obviously 3 teams do not go into 2 slots. So it means one team's going to be left out in the cold. In this case, last time out, it was France. This time out, it's Canada. But you know what? You want Canada to be doing the best they can, and so finishing as high as they can. So 5th place is, it's the consolation final, and it's a consolation to all the Canadian fans, the Canadian players as well. But what did you make of the weekend, Jeff?
Well, obviously, day one wasn't a great one, but you said Canada finished 5th in this tournament, and they're also, I believe, 5th on the standings now. And why I mention that is, yes, Australia and New Zealand are a cut above everyone else, if you look at the standings. But 3, realistically, to 7th place, it's pretty tight. Like 3 to 6 is tight. USA with 54, and then Japan has 46, and they're number 6. So that's 8 points between 1, 2, 3, at least 4 teams. And Fiji's a bit down there at 40, but they're not that far off. One good tournament, finish 3rd or 4th, you're probably right back in that group too. So it's like you said, if you're, if you're not on it day one, or you don't have the luck of the ball in one of those 3 games, or even 2 of the 3 games, you're in a tough spot on day 2. But Canada did make the 5th, or did make the best they could on day 2 and finish 5th. I would also like to say congrats to Brianne Nicholas for now having the most Sevens tournament appearances. So congratulations to her.
Yes, huge congratulations to her achievement. And going back, as you say, currently in 3rd in the standings is the USA, and only 6 points behind in fifth place is Canada. And all it takes is one good result, one
One
overtime
second place
win.
finish. How far
Yeah,
up are you going to move?
exactly.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it's positive then to look ahead, because if there's anything that can help Canada, it is going to be home field advantage. Because next up, in a month's time, we are heading to Vancouver for the Vancouver Sevens. Not only will we have the Canadian women's sevens team look to move up their table, but we will be having the men in the Tri-Nations Challenge, which will include Canada, Chile, and Japan. And we'll also have the men's sevens Division 1, but no one really is paying attention to that because there's no Canadian team in it, so why would we care? Anyway, that'll be coming up in a month's time on the 8th and 9th of March.
And one last question for you about the sevens, just specifically about the women's, Canada women's, is they really want to finish sixth place or higher in the standings. Is that correct? To avoid any relegation.
Well, this is the thing, is that with the new championship structure coming into place, I'm not entirely sure, because I think it being like a 12-team series with 3 legs, it's... First of all, nothing's been given from World Rugby or Sevens of how that structure is going to be. It may be... I believe it's going to be 3 pools of 4, as it was last year, and basically the top ranking teams will go into the championship game, and the lower ranked teams will go into the playoffs. And I think it may just be a structure of whoever finishes in the top 8 will be in Sevens Division 1 for next season, and whoever's in the bottom 4, they'll be relegated to Division 2 or the Challenger Series.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them being relegated, but I just wanted, where's the safety net?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They may have removed a safety net, so it's 3 legs of the World Championship, and you gotta be scoring high in each of them. I think, yeah, you want to be finishing high in the pools so that you'll be in the safe zone for getting points and such. But again, when we have more information released from World Rugby or Rugby Canada or Sevens, we will let everyone know either on an episode of the podcast or on our social media accounts. And speaking of Sevens, we are actually returning to the Challenger Series. Canada, as you know, were champions of Sevens Division 3, which got them a place in the Challenger Series, and they will be on their first leg this coming weekend, which will be taking place in Nairobi, Kenya. And you can watch those games most likely on TSN Plus, and they will be available with full information once we know on our social media channels. So, we've had a bit of rugby news over the past couple of weeks, and one such news is the signing with Doncaster Knights, is that Cole Keith is joining the Knights, I believe, for the remainder of their season. They're currently in the English Championship, and recently was named on the bench for their latest game versus Worcester Warriors. So, Cole, congratulations on the signing. Hopefully you'll be getting a lot of game time between now and the end of the season, and get you primed and ready for the Nations Cup that we'll experience, hopefully, in a few months' time.
And hopefully he will encourage or he'll give the English clubs over there incentive to sign other Canadians.
Yeah, well, playing in the United Kingdom has worked out well for a lot of Canadians recently. Look at Jeff Hassler, Tyler Ardron, DTH Van der Merwe. You know, it's a place to be. But yeah, congratulations again to Cole. Hopefully it's opening doors for you and lots of opportunities. Alright, so as we all know, the Olympics are currently taking place. And if you want to watch any of the Olympic footage, you can do so on CBC Gem. But you can also find the final episode of the latest season of Dragon's Den, in which you may have noticed some very familiar faces appearing before the Dragons, and that's because Rugby Canada appeared with their ask of $250,000 for 1 year of premium sponsorship. I just want to clarify a few things, that this was filmed prior to the Women's Rugby World Cup. Nathan Brombis led. He was partnered with Pamphilette Boycer, Sophie de Goody, and Jocelyn Barrio, who is the Women's Sevens head coach. And there was a demonstration that was provided by Paige Farris and Ben Lesage. Now, if you've seen it already, you understand how everything went down. And it was basically that Brombis, Barrio, Boycer, de Goody were basically explaining why they've come on Dragon's Den and why they were asking for $250,000. And basically saying that, there's financial difficulties with any level of sport in Canada if you're not an NHL team. And especially for a minor sport of, Canadian rugby, they're explaining that some of the players are only getting $2,000 a month from when they're training with the team, and they're having to take other jobs. And the Dragons themselves were very receptive to this. They were, asking questions about the importance of rugby, the safety aspect of as well. Really bring into effect the message we had last week about T1 rugby and how to get people on board, because they see it as just like a violent contact sport. I think Boyce's explanation of why she understood the representation of being a woman of colour in a rugby team, and that she can therefore be an inspiration for other girls of colour and women of colour to be like, there's someone that looks like me on the team as well. I thought that was really touching. And yeah, despite all that lip service, the Dragons showed their interest and respect, but ultimately each of the one said no. Jeff, what were your thoughts on this segment?
Well, first for Brisa, she told stop, as you said, the inclusivity of rugby, and that was definitely positively recepted by the Dragons. Obviously, I mean, I understand why no deal was made. The Dragons did explain their positions on why it just wasn't feasible for them to make a deal with Rugby Canada at this point. It was interesting hearing Arlene's comments. I thought that was quite interesting how she kind of put it out there about the federal government needing to step up. I also think that's probably one reason why Rugby Canada went on the show, probably knowing they were unlikely to make a deal. Arlene also said keep in touch with her after this broadcast. So it'll be interesting to see if she's back channeling anything to help them out in other ways, because there's more than one way you can get help. You don't just need a jersey sponsor. There's other ways to do funding help there too. So it was obviously disappointing that no deal was made, but it was understandable from both sides too. In that case, one thing it did make me think about, and I was kind of disappointed that Ben Lesage didn't stay on longer, because if you noticed on his jersey, there was no sponsorship on his jersey, whereas the women's jerseys, and full credit to them, they are performing better than the men's national team. So I understand why they're focusing with them mostly, and they had the World Cup coming up. But it's definitely going back to Arlene's point about the federal government also needing to step up. Hopefully other Canadian businesses will step up too. And it made me think, there's still no announcement about a jersey sponsor for the men's national team. And yes, Bomberries has been quite quiet, I thought, as the CEO, honestly, since his appointment. Now, I was glad to see him on there and taking his points, and he spoke well, as did Sophie de Goody too, spoke well. But it still would like to see some progress on that front, not just for the men's, but also for the women's team too. I don't want to just focus on the men's here too, because both teams need sponsorship. The women do deserve it more, but the men are now are working on working on improving their position for their upcoming World Cup because they're going to want to get to that round of 16 at least, maybe you know, strike gold, get to the quarterfinals, and somehow automatically qualify for the next one. So
Yeah.
hopefully this will uh, this will kickstart some movement there for this on the sponsorship side of the things for both the men's and women's game in Canada,
Yeah.
and increase the profile of the sport too.
Absolutely. I think this was in the same way like a lot of businesses go onto Dragon's Den knowing that the likelihood of getting a deal is slim. It's just to get promotion
Mhm.
and get eyes on the product. And being on Dragon's Den doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the deal, but it also doesn't mean that you're going to go under in the next 12 months or anything along those lines.
And any deal made on the show is always subject to due diligence, and
Mm-hmm.
that, like, I wasn't saying that's going to happen to Rugby Canada, but yeah, even if they make
Yeah,
a deal
yeah,
on the show, it can fall apart later.
yeah. I think so. To also put into context is that this was recorded before the World Cup, which also means it was recorded before the men qualified for the men's Rugby World Cup as well. So I believe now that they have, not only do they improve their profile for advertisers and sponsorship partnerships, but they also receive a funding boost from World Rugby as well. So that's always good to hear and see if that can be improved. And World Rugby will set guidelines in order to maintain funding for upcoming World Cup qualifiers and so on and so forth. But the main thing is to get the product out, get the identification there, and I think as well, I respect that Brombis came out and said, "Hey, this is the nature of minor sports in Canada. Is that if you're not one of the big four, you're going to be struggling to get the funding, to get the recognition, and to even just go on Dragon's Den and be like, hey, we're looking for financial investment. We're not asking for $1 billion or anything like that. We're asking for something that's reasonable, and it's a 1 year partnership. And if at the end of the year you don't want to renew, that's fine. Instead of underselling the direness of the position of the sport of, because I'm pretty sure like every member of Rugby Canada, whether that's Rugby Ontario, Rugby Quebec, Alberta Rugby, even the BC Bears, are like, yeah, we'd love to help out as much as we can, but the bank account only has so much in it, and there's only so much we can do and so much we can get. So I think this was a realistic take on the position of rugby within Canada. I think that it being, what, 4 or 5 months since it was recorded to it coming out is not the best. I think like maybe if this could have come out in maybe like November, shortly after the the Women's World Cup final, then more eyes on the product, more attention to the sport, and striking while the iron's hot, essentially. And then again, part of me from like a business perspective is that only $250,000 for a year sponsorship. It's one of those like weird paradoxes in business, is that if you give too low a sum, companies don't want to invest because they don't think they can make that money back, and so you got to sell it higher to get a bigger return. It's a weird thing, and obviously I'm not business minded in that sense. I'm not running the numbers for Rugby Canada, so I don't know what they thought was going to work and what would have come off as greedy otherwise. But I appreciate the effort. I think is like the message of it. I know we've seen like a couple of memes on social media of Nathan Bromwith begging on the streets of Toronto, trying to get a few coffers up, but it's the reality of the sport is that it's up against some stiff competition, and you're trying to market it as best you can. And if this is the thing that gets the Canadian government to be like, all right, we'll give you an extra $250,000 or an extra $500,000, stop saying that we're bad at our jobs and stuff, then I'm for that.
Yeah, I think this was definitely a big move, big picture play by Rugby Canada here, trying to get more noticed. So credit to them for actually trying to do something that out of the box thinking to get more noticed here.
Yeah. And that's that. Maybe there is an investor out there who's like, you know what, I'm a fan of rugby. I can afford to, maybe not $250,000, maybe like 125,000, but
one of the Dragons played.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe there's someone at MLSE who's like, you know what, maybe, just maybe, I can do that. And obviously there's the charitable side of it. So any donation that goes into Rugby Canada goes back into the pitch. That is something they kept talking about during their sales pitch to the Dragons as well. So if you want a charitable tax write-off, there you go. If for all those business-minded multi-millionaires who just want to see the Canadian rugby team do really well at the next couple of World Cups.
Vancouver, I'm looking at you. Supposedly they're there in Vancouver, supposedly, but no, I've heard stories.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. Hopefully, in the next few months, let's say that the men's have a front of shirt sponsor that we can all get.
I would honestly be a bit surprised if they don't have a sponsor going into whichever it was at Nations Cup they start playing. I would honestly be a bit surprised.
Right. Well,
qualifying to the World Cup. I was a bit surprised they didn't have one for November. So hopefully they have it organized now.
A bit more time to dot the I's and cross the T's and check the boxes, and hopefully, we'll have a sponsor by the time of the Nations Cup. And the Nations Cup, we believe the general competition will be on Premier Sports, but obviously that is a future thing to worry about. But if you're looking to watch any rugby this coming weekend, well, good news. The Six Nations continues on with round 2, and Super Rugby Pacific begins this week. Both of which will be available on Premier Sports in Canada. As we said, the Canadian Sevens men's team will be playing their first round of the Challenger Series in Nairobi. Those games will be available on TSN+. And the Premiership Women's Rugby continues with those games available on YouTube. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces, on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast on Spotify and YouTube, and we're available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Jeff, where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on X at WP Rugby Jeff.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Jeff, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby Podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.